Hello, everybody. Welcome to the debut of Fantasy Football Live on Sportsnet, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. We're all over the place. Andy McNamara alongside Shoaib. Week one, folks. We made it. We did it. Show, we're here. It's football. We had the week, the opener on Thursday. But for today's show, we're going to take you up really almost till kickoff, till noon. Get you the latest injury updates, news, notes, our starts, our sits, our sleepers for each position group. And, of course, take your questions on your fantasy football team for week one and season long. Leave them in the comment section, and we'll get into those as the show goes. Show, are you pumped, baby? You ready for football?
Man, I can't believe after the tumultuous year that 2020 has been that we have finally gotten here, Andy. I know we got the Thursday night game, like you said. That was the appetizer, but this is the main course. Today is the main course, and I plan, once we're done this show today, I plan to go park my butt on the couch and watch football all day. I don't know about you.
Absolutely. We got our gear on, too. I hope you're wearing your fan gear at home, folks. Tell us who you're wearing. I got my Cleveland Browns 1980 Brian Sipe vintage cardiac kids jersey signed by owner Jimmy Haslam of the Browns. You got a nice little Pat get up there.
A little pullover, yeah. It's a little cold here. It's a little rainy today, so I feel like I'm going to be a little warmer today with my pullover here.
Right, get ready for it. Some news and notes coming out of the morning. You're waking up, you're getting ready for football. Right. You get on that second cup of coffee, whatever it might be. Something you really got to know is Kenny Golladay doubtful for the Detroit Lions. That is huge because what that means, Show, of course, is along with Danny Amendola, who you don't really he's got a hamstring. You don't really anticipate Danny Amendola being a big deal, but with Golladay doubtful, Amendola doubtful, it becomes Marvin Jones and TJ Hawkinson, right?
Yeah, exactly. Marvin Jones is going to be the guy to start. He's going to get the top cover guy for the Bears at the same time, but I think Stafford is good enough to be able to distribute the ball amongst these other targets. Remember last year too, Andy, when TJ Hawkinson came in week one and he was great and everyone anointed him. Oh my gosh, he's going to be the next great tight end, the next great rookie tight end, because we know tight ends don't necessarily contribute right away in week one, and then he kind of fizzled out. And I think that was the high point of his season last year.
It was.
But with Marvin Jones being the number one guy, Kenny Golladay out, Danny Amendola out, I like Hawkinson as well. They'll be the guys, even against a pretty stingy Chicago Bears defense, I feel like.
Well, you know what? That's a great segue. So we got our first question in Kirk on Facebook. Montgomery or Cohen from the Bears. Now, Montgomery banged up. Looks like he's going to play. Tariq Cohen's, he's one of those guys, Show, that I feel you chase, right? I feel like Cohen will go in and he'll have 1 week and then everyone's clamoring for him. And then he'll do nothing for 3. And then he'll come back for another. Personally, I would try to use none of them. But I think if you got to go with one, track the health of Montgomery. And I think at least if he is in there and the snaps aren't limited too bad, at least he's going to be the first option, where Cohen's still more of a gadget guy to me.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that in the sense that, because remember there was an injury, I think, to David Montgomery towards the end of training camp. I think there was maybe about around August 26th, August 27th, towards the end of August, he got injury. I think it was a hamstring injury, and it kept him out of practice, kept him out of other organized activities with the team. And they said the timetable originally was 2 to 4 weeks, and we're still within that 2 to 4 week time frame, obviously, because 4 weeks would be the end of September. So just that, I think that's something to monitor as well. I think if you have a PPR league, it might be worth taking a look at Tariq Cohen, but I think that's probably it. I agree with you in the sense that with Mitch Trubisky as the starting quarterback there, other than Allen Robinson, it kind of just downgrades everyone.
Well, and the thing I think we have to remember as well is how long is the leash on Mitch Trubisky? Like, it's not going to shock me if we have a halftime change.
Sure.
And Foles goes in, right? There's a lot of questions, and I don't like that offense really at all. But I guess out of the two, like if you're doing a DraftKings contest, DFS, sure, pop Cohen and one over Montgomery and see what happens. But for season long, we got another question here. Let's see. Jason on Facebook, status update on Evans. If he plays, do you start him? Ooh. And this is a case here, Show, where when you look at Evans, if he is all in or not, they've already said if he plays, it's going to be a reduced snap count. So to me, right away, I look at that and say, I'm going Godwin all the way. Now, obviously, if you drafted Evans in your season long, you don't have Godwin likely. So I would say it really depends. Jason, if you want to type in your other wide receiver options, we'll try to help you out with that. I would try to go away personally from Mike Evans in this one because I just don't know how much he's going to play.
And that's the thing, right? Even if he does play, he'll likely be, I think they were saying from some of these NFL insiders down south, you're seeing that he's going to be probably on some kind of snap count. And now I think Mike Evans is good enough to make these snaps count, but I think other than that, whenever a guy's on a snap count, and especially you got to consider the injury that's keeping him out potentially is the hamstring, which is the injury that kept him out of those 3 games to end the season. Like it ended his season last year,
Yep.
and it's still bothering him this year. I would personally stay away and hope that the rest of the Bucs offense can get right. I would actually look to probably more Gronk to pick up the slack in Evans's absence, but it remains to be seen. But at the same time, I just out of an abundance of caution, I would stay away from Mike Evans this weekend.
Right. Lots of questions coming in, and keep them coming, folks. We love it here. Fantasy Football Live on Sportsnet, getting you ready for week 1, your fantasy football team in the National Football League. Dylan Thomas asks, Drew Brees or Tom Brady? I love this question show. Now, I don't know. Yeah, you still have, that's half homerism for Tom Brady, right?
I definitely do, yes.
For me, I'm going to go Drew Brees based on familiarity of the offense. We know how good Tom Brady can be. Is there any sort of early chemistry issues? If Mike Evans does play, does that affect how Brady distributes the ball? I just think Drew Brees and Sean Payton, they've been doing the same offense for 10 years, right? More, right? Like you can more than that. You can just pop in Drew Brees and go. So I'm going to say in this matchup, Drew Brees.
You're not afraid of Taysom Hill vulturing your favorite player, Taysom Hill?
Taysom Hill is just a leech, a suction cup, a parasite to fantasy football. That is the annoying little twist, of course. But I'm going to say I'll still go with Drew Brees.
All right, fair enough. You know what? I as much as I want to be a homer and pick Brady, I think if you're picking between these two guys, I would only pick Drew Brees for this week because the question isn't how good are either of these guys for me. It's the question is how good is the Saints defense going to be against Brady, and how good is the Bucs defense going to be against Drew Brees? Now we know the Bucs defense was pretty opportunistic last season, but at the same time, the Saints defense is pretty good, right? I mean, the Saints defense is one of those units that people are taking in drafts to be their season-long DST. Now, what I don't believe in season-long DSTs. I believe in streaming personally, but at the same time, I think the Saints defense is fierce enough with all the additions they made, the tweaks they made over the offseason, to at the very least make Brees for this weekend a little more of an attractive commodity. Having said that, I do think that this game will be a very high scoring game. I don't like if you have to quote unquote go with Brady, then I think he'll be okay.
I'm with you. I think you'd be fine. Let's see. We got another one. Don't want to miss any here. Brandon Thorogood says Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette in Tampa. Show, I got to say, I got none. This is a cannibalizing situation because here's what we have to think about. Ronald Jones, Bruce Arians like, oh, Ronald Jones is still going to be the guy. Okay, why'd you go get Leonard Fournette? And then through the week, Leonard Fournette's looking really good. We got to get him some action. Well, okay, what am I going to see here? Is there going to be enough ball to go around? I would rather say go somewhere like, I'm just looking at different options here, like maybe even like a James White.
Sure.
Just somebody who maybe has a more of a defined role. We don't know the role of the two. I guess if you absolutely have to pick between the two, I'll say Ronald Jones because he's been in the offense longer, but I don't love it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You don't love either option. I would personally lean Fournette only because, right? And again, you're splitting hairs here, right? And you have to go with your gut, I think, ultimately, because neither of them are super attractive. But I would go with Fournette only because I believe, and I've said this to you before off the air, that I believe that Fournette is the more attractive and more talented back of these two guys in terms of his capabilities, the way he can catch the ball as well. He didn't do that so much in Jacksonville, but I know we know he was capable of doing that when he was in college. I know he's a little far removed from that now. I feel like Fournette is the more talented back between the two. So if I had to pick personally, I would go with Fournette, but I would prefer not to have to make that decision and start someone else, basically.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Let's see. We got more questions. You guys are bringing it. Love it. Jacob on YouTube. Mark Ingram or Preston Williams at the flex spot.
All right.
Williams has been a real riser. Now, Devontae Parker had that hamstring injury. He's been cleared, but okay, is it really clear? Is there a case that he could yank it during the game? Preston Williams is interesting in against a depleted New England defense there, Show, but the secondary is still serviceable, right?
The secondary is still serviceable. I think the secondary is probably the strongest aspect of that New England defense, even with all the other guys. It's the linebackers and the defensive the DLs that have been a little bit depleted, but still Stephon Gilmore is there, J.C. Jackson, the Devin McCourty is still there, of course. So I think that for that reason, I would go away from Devontae Parker, but I don't mind seeing Preston Williams because you got to think you mentioned that that Devontae Parker is a little bit hobbled and the hamstring injury is something that he's been dealing with. He had the injury in practice, I want to say, leading up to the season opener today. So I feel like it's kind of similar to the Mike Evans question that we were asked earlier, in the sense that if a guy has the hamstring injury, I would feel more comfortable going away from him until it's fully healed, because you got to think that in some fashion, in some regard, he's going to be dealing with it. So that's a long-winded way of saying I would trust Preston Williams in that secondary role because we know Ryan Fitzpatrick likes to sling it. Now, and I also know you don't really care for Mark Ingram, not just because they're playing the Browns, but because it's a huge committee back there.
Oh, that's the thing. And with this question, I might lean with Ingram. I think Ingram, talent-wise, I think his ceiling is higher. I think Williams is the safer bet because of, and with that Baltimore committee. Now, remember, folks, John Harbaugh, head coach of the Ravens, said in the offseason, he wants to run not one, not two, not three, four running backs. He wants a rotation. That's fantasy death. J.K. Dobbins is back there. What's he going to do? Gus Edwards? Hill? Ingram? Oh, and by the way, Lamar Jackson likes to move a little bit too. There are way too many question marks for me when it comes to that backfield. Could Ingram go off for 122 TDs? Yes. Could he get 10 carries and not do that much? Also, yes. I'll say safer bet. I'll go Williams. I like to be a little safe, so I think I'll go Williams on that one.
I think important to remember too that when it comes to Ingram, I feel like the earlier in the year for me is probably better for Ingram. As the year goes on, I think you might see John Harbaugh be more willing, and not even just because of injuries or whatnot, or attrition and all those kinds of things that definitely happen over the course of a long season, especially with no preseason. So you got to think that injuries might happen a little more. Like, you cross your fingers and hope that's not the case. But if it does, I feel like later in the season, you might see more usage out of J.K. Dobbins. So if there was a time to get out more usage out of Mark Ingram, I feel like it's maybe the next 4 to 6 weeks. But we'll see if anything happens going forward. I will say, I mentioned this to you earlier when we did our radio program for the fantasy show, but the Browns give up a lot of points on the ground to running backs. So I think you hope that does not continue. But I think I don't really think the Browns defense has changed so much that number will go down by an appreciable amount, let's say.
Now, it's going to be a challenge for the running game. Linebacker core is thin. You do have Myles Garrett back, which is a plus, obviously. And you mentioned the fantasy show. That's 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern every Sunday morning across the Sportsnet radio network. And you can give us a follow on Twitter as well, at AndyMC81, at SNS Alli. More questions here. Let's see. C. Chav on YouTube. Chris Carson, Mostert, or Boston Scott PPR. Now, the PPR function. So I'm gonna cancel out Mostert right away. Out of those three, I'm canceling out Mostert.
Okay.
I think Coleman, McKinn, there's Wilson, there's 4 guys. Can I count? Do I know Mostert's going to be the guy? No. Kyle Shanahan loves to use committees and mix and match. And I think, you could get a whole lot of running back usage with how decimated that receiving core is.
That's the thing, yeah.
In San Francisco. So I'll count Mostert right out of that one. Do you agree? We'll cut him?
Yeah, I think cut him from that option only because, like you said, with what is it? Let's see, Deebo Samuel on the 3-week IR and Brandon Ayuk questionable. If he does play, who knows how effective he'll be. So maybe you see Jimmy Garoppolo throw the ball 10 times, 9 of them to George Kittle, perhaps. So if once to maybe Raheem Mostert or to Tevin Coleman or something like that. If that's the case, then I would agree with you and move on from Mostert for this week until the wide receiver situation becomes a little less muddled, a little more clear, which are glass half full, half empty, whichever you want to go with.
And out of the other two, I'll go Chris Carson overall. I think what you got to look at is the talent. And even though Miles Sanders went down, Boston Scott, Corey Clement, his presence it's intriguing because more of a pass catcher, but Scott can catch the ball too. Does Scott get a full workload? Does Carson Wentz focus more on the tight ends, on Ertz and Goddard?
Right.
Healthy Deshaun Jackson. That's the question. Whereas we know with Chris Carson, you just got Carlos Hyde behind you. Carlos Hyde's not going to be getting starter rep snaps. Carson's healthy. The guy's an absolute beast when he is healthy, and he is. So I'm going to say Chris Carson.
Yeah, it's funny to say that the Seattle Seahawks running back situation has really cleared up over the
Yeah.
past couple of months, I'd say, like since the offseason has begun, essentially, because J.D. McKissick was shipped off to Washington,
Yep.
and then you got Rashad Penny on the PUP list to start the year. So you pretty much only have Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde, and I think most people would say that Chris Carson is the more talented back. And then you look at the situation you mentioned, Miles Sanders being out for the Eagles. I don't think Boston Scott's the worst option in the world, but considering that we know Seattle likes to run the ball just a whole ton, I've always said that if the Seahawks didn't run the ball that much and they let Russell Wilson throw the ball 600 times a year, like they let Aaron Rodgers used to, and like they let Matt Ryan do in Atlanta, he'd probably be the most consistent quarterback, the best fantasy quarterback in football. But as it is, they love to run the ball, so I'd go with Chris Carson. Plus, the Eagles are dealing with just a plethora of injuries to their offensive line. Lane Johnson may not play. Two other offensive linemen are injured as well. So I would probably lean, I'd probably lean Chris Carson.
In that one. Now, Cortland Sutton is in our next question, and this is a big impact of that Denver Broncos game. So this comes from Matt on YouTube. Eric Ebron, John Brown, or Cortland Sutton, flex standard scoring. So Cortland Sutton, questionable. He's going to be a game time decision. That is updated just a few minutes ago. Shoulder injury. I'm not counting on Cortland Sutton playing. I think that really downgrades the whole Denver offense, even a Jerry Jeudy, who then would get thrust into WR1 role as a rookie. That's a lot of pressure. Now, he's got the talent long term. I love Jerry Jeudy, but that to me really puts maybe more of a lean on the running game in that Melvin Gordon, Philip Lindsay backfield there. So I'm going to rule out Sutton right away just because we don't know if he's going to play. And if he does, banged up shoulder, how much is he going to be on the field?
That's the thing. It's the same conversation we were having with Mike Evans, the same conversation we were having with Devontae Parker. It's the same kind of thing, right? And I don't think you, in week one, I don't know that you want to be gambling with a banged up shoulder, a bum shoulder right off the bat. I think you probably will have safer options, more healthier options on your team right off the bat than Cortland Sutton. And Matt also asks about Eric Ebron and John Brown. Now, I think John Brown for week one might be my pick for the Buffalo Bills. Maybe that's a byproduct of us being in Toronto and watching the Bills more than a lot of other teams at the very least, because we get those games. But at the very least, I like John Brown just because perhaps with the truncated offseason, he might be a little more immediately valuable than Stephon Diggs. I think by the end of the season, Diggs overtakes Brown, no question, because Diggs is very talented. But for now, for week one, against a pretty bad Jets defense, I like John Brown.
Yeah, I am. So Eric Ebron, I do like him as a tight end option in Pittsburgh for the year, especially that position group, which is thin. Ebron, when given the chance, really popped. He really evolved and came out of his shell from being pretty much a bust in Detroit when he went to the Colts. So I like him there, but I'm with you 100% with John Brown. That secondary coverage, he went over 1,000 yards as the primary target last year. So especially with that familiarity carrying over, I think John Brown is definitely the choice there. Update from Adam Schefter. This came out 1 minute ago. 49ers still uncertain whether running back Tevin Coleman will play today against Arizona due to a combo of pre-existing health conditions and the air quality in the Bay Area, per sources. Decision belongs to Coleman. And as one source said today, so much is fluid with this situation. So that really brings up, okay, if you got to track that, if you're a Coleman or Mostert owner,
kidding.
If Coleman's out, that's got to bump Mostert up your fantasy chart.
A little bit, at least a little bit, right? And that's a good point about the air quality from Schefter, because I think that's something to track right up until that game starts because of all the wildfires going on in California and seeing, I think much like you can check radar for down in Buffalo whenever you want to watch a Blue Jays game, you can check the radar to see where the rain clouds are. You can also check the radar to see where these smoke clouds are as well, especially in California. And now I know the 49ers play in Santa Clara, but at the same time, just check because there is a possibility things get at the very least delayed. Again, no signs coming out this morning beyond what you just read, Andy, that the game will be postponed or delayed. But it's something to keep in mind, especially if you have anyone on the 49ers or anyone on their opponents the Arizona Cardinals, and those guys have a lot of fantasy relevant players:
Oh.
Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, Kenny and Drake. So if you have any of those guys, just keep it in the back of your mind. I don't think it'll end up being a huge deal, but you have to monitor that if you're a fan of either of those two teams.
Absolutely. A quick sneaky stash maybe for your tight end group. Speaking of Arizona, Dan Arnold. Okay, Max Williams is listed as the starter, folks. He's going to be more of a pass blocker out there for protection. Dan Arnold and Kyler Murray have really been connecting in the offseason. Murray didn't use the tight end last year, but he had like Charles Clay.
That's the thing,
right? And the offense didn't really lend itself to it, but it's just somebody. If you're a little thin at tight end, maybe sneak Dan Arnold down there, and if he pops, maybe it'll work out for you. Let's get some more questions here. Xander on Facebook: Cam Akers or Kareem Hunt?
Oh, okay.
So I like this question a lot. I'd like to know if it was PPR or standard. If it's PPR, I'm definitely going with Kareem Hunt. When we see for the Rams show, Malcolm Brown is technically listed as the starter. Darrell Henderson was banged up but is cleared. Cam Akers, I think, clearly the most talented back, but that's 3 players in really undefined roles, and that makes me nervous. So I'm going to go Kareem Hunt in more of a defined role behind Nick Chubb and somebody that they can swing out and keep on the field as a pass catcher.
I've said this to you before that I do genuinely think the Browns perhaps have the best 1-2 punch at running back, maybe genuinely in the entire NFL when you look at how other committees are deployed and when you look at bell cows versus their backups as opposed to real 1-2 guys, if that makes sense. Almost like a 1-2 goalie tandem in the NHL, it feels like to me sometimes. But I feel like for me, for this question, I'm going to go Cam Akers, only because Cam, so like you mentioned, Darrell Henderson banged up. I think with Cam Akers, they're looking for someone to fill the role of Todd Gurley. Now, we know how the season ended for Todd Gurley last year. It was almost, the narrative seemed to be that they were saving Todd Gurley in Los Angeles for the playoffs, and then they just unbottled him too late, and then it didn't matter, right? It didn't end up mattering in the end. So I feel like they're looking for someone to fill that role, and I think it can be Cam Akers. Now, it might take a couple of weeks for that to pan out, but I would still feel comfortable this week in week 1 against the Cowboys defense that is good, it's stout, but it also can be had. And I think that this is a game that has some potential to be a really high scoring game. So in high scoring games, I would also, just as a general rule, feel comfortable plugging guys in who have the potential for a lot of touches at the very least. So I would take Cam Akers, but you're right. There is some inherent risk, especially for the rookie in a truncated offseason, to use that term again.
Yeah, in his first NFL game.
Yeah.
Next one, Dylan on Facebook: Zach Ertz or Jack Doyle? Now Show.
Jack Doyle.
I'm a Jack Doyle believer. I'm a truther of Uncle Jack Doyle. Hey, this coming out from Ian Rappaport 11 minutes ago on Twitter, saying tensions are high for the Eagles and tight end Zach Ertz, who got into an animated discussion with GM Howie Roseman late last week. So this is interesting because I don't know how much you equate that, how it's going to translate onto the field. Does Ertz get distracted? Does it uber motivate Ertz? Do the players have Ertz's back and Carson Wentz is going to force feed him the ball to prove a point?
Right.
This is a little, and I think we might be at risk of maybe overthinking what this means, but it is something to keep in mind. I would say still, I think the better option is Zach Ertz. He's the more proven guy. He's with Carson Wentz. I love Jack Doyle for the whole season because Phillip Rivers kind of likes to throw to his tight ends, right?
Yeah.
But I'd say the safer bet is Zach Ertz, even with Dallas Goedert, because last year we saw Ertz and Goddard were both top 10 fantasy tight ends, so both can eat.
And you got to think, too, that even though Deshaun Jackson is going to be there for the Eagles, Jalen Reagor, I think he's going to play today. I think I saw somewhere that he will be active at the very least, but who knows how effective he'll be. He was banged up. Deshaun Jackson himself is getting a little older. You know what I mean? I feel like the most reliable pass-catching options, especially with Miles Sanders out, especially with the offensive line hurting, I feel like the most reliable options for Carson Wentz, I should say, in an offseason that has been so weird, no preseason games, not a lot of OTAs, all those kinds of things, will be the guys he already has chemistry with, the guys he already knows how to throw to, how to find, where they like to be in the field, and Zach Ertz is that guy. I mean, how many years have we been saying, Andy, especially now that George Kittle has come onto the scene in the last couple of seasons, after Travis Kelce, who's already played this week, obviously, and Kittle, who's playing against the Cardinals, the next best tight end, just generally in the tiers of tight end, usually has been Zach Ertz, right? I think even with that stuff you said about him having an animated discussion with Howie Roseman, that's something to track certainly. But for week one, I'd be surprised if he wasn't out there, and I'd also be surprised if Carson Wentz didn't look his way early and often.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's get to a Twitter question here, and you can tweet us as well at AndyMC81 at SNS Alli. This comes from at Michael Pagano 71. Said PPR, who do you trust? Austin Hooper with the Browns, Hunter Henry with the Chargers, or Noah Fant with the Broncos? So a tight end start question out of those three, and it's PPR. It's tough. So I'm not really big on Noah Fant, but Courtland Sutton's not going to play, or if he does, very limited. Does that up him? Austin Hooper, now you had on the fantasy show, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern every Sunday across the Sportsnet radio network, you had a stat on the Ravens defending tight ends, or something like they were like the best team in defending tight ends when it comes to fantasy, right?
Yeah, last year the tight ends points allowed to tight ends from the Baltimore Ravens averaged 4.7 points. That's how good the Baltimore Ravens were at defending tight ends last year, and I would argue that the Ravens defense perhaps got better. Now we know one of their corners is going to be out today. I think it was Jimmy Williams. I think it was, right. It could be
Smith. I think
Jimmy Smith. Pardon me. Yes, Jimmy Smith.
Yeah,
and he's going to be out today. So they do have Marlon Humphrey and all those other guys as well. But even with Jimmy Smith out, I feel like the tight end situation for Austin Hooper, like as a year-long tight end, I like Austin Hooper. I gotta say, I do. But for this week and against Baltimore specifically, I would fade him. Me personally.
Yeah, and they paid Hooper a lot of money. I'm with you. I think the week one, and Austin Hooper lived at Baker Mayfield's house, folks. Lived at his house for like a month in the offseason to try to get that chemistry going. So I think that's going to be there. But when I look at opportunity, what do we say always on the fantasy show? It's opportunity equals success.
True.
I think Noah Fant is going to have the most opportunity with Courtland Sutton out. Hunter Henry, I just don't believe in Tyrod Taylor. I don't. I think it's only Austin Eckler. I don't believe in Hunter Henry. I'm going to lean a slight edge to Noah Fant and a very close second to Austin Hooper in that case. But I think season-long Austin Hooper out of those three are the best option.
Agreed. Yeah, I think I would probably lean, especially because of the injury to Sutton. If the injury hadn't happened to Sutton, I'd probably go with Hunter Henry in that specific case. But they're all, I feel like, lower ends of the options here. Like they're kind of like they're almost like tight end streamers, I feel like, for this particular week. But I agree with you, Hooper for the entire season, but for this week in particular, Noah Fant. You know I'm big on Drew Lock too, Andy. So we gotta plug that guy.
Lock on lock, says Shoaib Ali. Yes. Let's get to our next one. Alex on YouTube. Jimmy G or Cam Newton? I don't think it's much of a discussion. I could see Jimmy G go on how he did in the playoffs, throwing the ball like 6-7 times.
Yeah.
I think Cam Newton has the option to be more productive. We don't know how he's going to look, but I just think the ceiling and opportunity is way higher with Cam Newton this week, especially against the Dolphins. That's a pretty good matchup.
And that's the thing, right? I mean, it's not as though the Arizona Cardinals defense is some crazy defense that Jimmy Garoppolo can't take advantage of. Like he can.
Sure.
But it's just that I think that the receiving options for the Patriots, even though there are some question marks there, right? I mean, like you were saying before, Julian Edelman is going to have a Q next to his name. Probably it'll be questionable age next to his name, probably for the rest of his career. I feel like, and God knows I love Julian Edelman, but N'Keal Harry still has to prove himself as well. So I understand the trepidation, but we know Cam likes to throw to his running backs. We know James White is pretty talented. Sony Michel looks like he's going to be healthier. I just think that the Patriots are a little more of an attractive option, and again, doubly so because they're playing the Dolphins, who have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. I know they signed some guys. I mean, they signed some guys from the Patriots. They signed Kyle Van Noy to play for his former head coach, former defensive coordinator, now head coach, Brian Flores. But I still think that ultimately Cam, a healthy Cam, because the last time we saw him healthy was probably at the beginning of 2018, and he was ripping it up back then. And if he can get back to that form, I think you'll be more than happy starting Cam Newton against a bad Miami defense.
Yeah, I think Miami's gotten better overall, but they're still not good. Yeah. So go with Cam Newton. Robert on Facebook, who should I start at my flex spot, Chris Thompson or Emmanuel Sanders? This I really like. Now, James Robinson's getting a lot of play on the Jaguars as being the starting running back, whatever that means in Jacksonville, who are just total mail it in tank mode.
Right.
Sanders with the Saints. Now, Sanders is rarely healthy for a full season, but if we're talking week one specifically, I kind of like the idea of Emmanuel Sanders, who flashed a bit when he with the 49ers last year before he got some bad rib injuries and was playing through that.
Yeah.
Secondary coverage to Michael Thomas. Now you got to work in Alvin Kamara. He's going to get a lot of touches too. Jared Cook maybe as well. If I'm looking at all of this today, I'm still going to lean Chris Thompson because of the pass catching, and I think the Jaguars are going to get down and need to throw the ball more, and he's going to be a nice, safe option. So I'll go Thompson today.
I've said this before a lot about Chris Thompson. If he is healthy, I genuinely think he is a very talented running back. It's just he has constantly struggled with injuries, which is a shame, right? I mean, it's a shame when any player struggles with injuries over the course of their career. And I think whenever he has been healthy, he has proven he is very talented. So I feel like with Chris Thompson, I would feel comfortable going with him. And now Robert didn't say whether his league was a PPR league or a standard league. If it's a PPR league, I feel like that makes Chris Thompson even more valuable. If it's a standard league, I probably would give the slightest of edges to Chris Thompson because I like what you said about the Jags being. I mean, they're probably going to be picking number 1 in the draft this year. Trevor Lawrence is going to be the quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars this time next year. But yeah, I think if it's a PPR league, that makes it a no-brainer in Chris Thompson's favor, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you too. Ron on YouTube, Jerry Jeudy or AJ Green?
Okay.
Now, AJ Green, folks, he doesn't want to be in Cincinnati. He made it pretty clear last year. He made no effort to really. Now, I'm not questioning the injury, but he wasn't exactly eager to rush back.
Yeah.
And this is going to be his last year there. Tyler Boyd and Joe Burrow have created some really good chemistry. You also have to think about Chargers defense versus a rookie quarterback. And it's not the most creative defense for the Chargers, but you can still rush, throw some confusing looks out there. So I don't really like the AJ Green matchup. I'll say Jerry Jeudy, even though it's the rookie, even though it's his first NFL start, he's really talented. And if Courtland Sutton is limited, which he will be at the very least, he's going to get some looks. And if they can develop that early chemistry with him and Locke, I think you can go that way. So in that format, I'll go Jerry Jeudy.
And that's the thing, right? I do think that AJ Green, I still think he has some gas left in the tank. But right now, going up against the Chargers, they can be had. Certainly no Derwin James for the Chargers either, right? The injury to Derwin James. And the Chargers they're primed now that Phillip Rivers has moved on until Herbert steps in there. And even if he does, I feel like they're primed for a little bit of a letdown. But I agree with you. I think Jerry Jeudy right now has the more attractive option. Plus, you got to think too, Andy, that just the general Denver situation, their whole offensive room, if you were to put all of their offensive weapons into one room, and I'm including Courtland Sutton in this, even though he's injured, but even take him out of the equation, I think genuinely, I think they have one of the more talented rooms in the NFL, albeit perhaps a bit young, but still. And I think Jerry Jeudy, if he's thrust into that number 1 role, I think he'll be able to have his production from a fantasy perspective as well. It might be a little bit more of a better, quote unquote, real life matchup. But at the same time, I think Jerry Jeudy is that talented. I mean, people were calling him and CeeDee Lamb the best wide receivers in the NFL draft, right? So if that's your talent level, you will probably succeed when it comes to fantasy.
A 1 and 1A in what was said to be the deepest wide receiver draft class in 20 years, right? So keep the questions coming. Let's see. Patrick on Facebook. How low should I be on Amari Cooper this week going against Jalen Ramsey? And that's a great question. Remember, too, it's not like Amari Cooper has to be force-fed the ball by Dak Prescott. He can throw to CeeDee Lamb. He can throw to Michael Gallup. He can throw to Blake Jarwin. He can throw or hand off to Ezekiel Elliott. Lots of options there. I still think probably at the spot where you drafted Amari Cooper, like if it's in your DraftKings contest, I'm avoiding Amari Cooper this week. But you probably drafted Amari Cooper high, relatively high. Do you have a better bench option than Amari Cooper to pop in? You probably don't. If you do, good on you. Go for it. But I would still say don't necessarily be afraid to. I think there is certainly a map of to where he can have a bad week because of those other options, especially if the coverage is there. But I still wouldn't be too afraid to start him if you don't have a better option.
And that's a thing, right? Like I was fading Amari this week leading up to this game because I feel like this game, as I mentioned before when we were talking about Cam Akers, I feel like this game has the potential to be a high scoring game, right? And if that's the case, you want the number 1 receiver on a very talented offense with a very talented quarterback throwing him the ball. So I think that equation means you probably shouldn't look away from Amari Cooper too much. But at the same time, Jalen Ramsey is going to be shadowing him. And you still want to see with CeeDee Lamb in the mix, with Blake Jarwin in the mix. You want to see how the Cowboys shake things out. I know it's a more of a tentative answer because week one with no preseason, the way the snap counts and the target shares are allotted is a little bit out of whack because you can't really point to a preseason game and say, oh, okay, well, this is how it's going to be. But at the same time, Amari Cooper is talented enough that I think that even with Jalen Ramsey on him, he will get his opportunities. And I think especially over maybe some other options you may have. Now, Patrick didn't say who else he had, but at the same time, like you said, the draft capital expended on Cooper was likely very high. So you probably kind of have to start him if that's the case.
Exactly. Zach Jackson on YouTube, Wentz or Stafford? So let's look matchup-wise here. Carson Wentz versus Washington. Stafford and the Lions versus the Bears. The Bears defense, remember how high people were drafting the DST for the Bears last year?
Yeah.
Like really, and it disappointed. It's a fluid situation. I wouldn't be like, I have the Bears defense on one of my fantasy leagues. I think they're going to have a nice little bounce back. I think situation wise, even with the banged up receivers and running backs, I got to go Carson Wentz because when you look at Washington, they gave up they were 29th in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks last year. Now their D-line is real good. Like Carson Wentz is going to have to get rid of the ball quick because you're going to have Chase Young coming at you. You got Montez Sweat. You got a really nice D-line. But maybe this is a case where he's dumping off to Boston Scott, to the tight ends, maybe the odd long one to Deshaun Jackson. I think the possibility for a bigger week fantasy-wise has to go to Carson Wentz because of the matchup.
Probably, yeah, because I do think that Stafford, because remember last year before he got injured, Andy, Stafford was just ripping up the NFL, right?
Yeah.
He was probably on pace to have maybe his best career the best season of his entire career. And I really do think that he will have a good season. I know that's a really good question because I feel like you're pretty much splitting hairs because we talked about Kenny Golladay. He's out. Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola is going to be out as well. Marvin Jones is going to be the main guy along with TJ Hawkinson, as we mentioned before. And if that's the case, then I feel like you're really just picking kind of half of one and a dozen of the other, basically, right? So I don't know. I just feel like it's hard to pick, but I guess I would go because of the matchup. Washington not being the greatest in the secondary, I'd probably go Carson Wentz as well.
Right, and they might not have the opportunity or the option to really try to wear them down with the run because of Boston Scott, Corey Clement, right? So there's that too. Maybe even the short passing, I think would favor Wentz. Alex on YouTube, pick one! ! Odell Beckham Jr., Terry McLaurin, DJ Chark, or Deshaun Jackson, half PPR. So I'm gonna write off Odell Beckham Jr. right away for week one. Because I need to see him be a real fantasy force for the first time in 4 years before I bite. I just got to. I need proof. That Baltimore defense we talked about, it's nasty. I think it's going to be a real run-focused look today. Terry McLaurin against that Eagles defense. I like Terry. Deshaun Jackson, again, there's going to be opportunity for him, but I think volume-wise, Chark's the one to go to. I think Chark's the one because he's going to be the top target for Gardner Minshew. It's a case where if they do get down to the Colts, which I expect they will, they're going to have to throw more garbage time. DJ Chark, I think, is your best bet there.
Yeah, if you're ranking these guys, it's DJ, probably Terry McLaurin afterwards because of the raw talent, Deshaun Jackson because he's healthy, and we know that Carson Wentz likes to get him the long ball, and then at the very bottom, Odell Beckham, because I think it'll always be a question mark with Odell, which is crazy to say considering how good he was just a couple of years ago, but it'll always be a question mark with Odell until it's not, essentially.
Exactly.
Right? And I think I'm waiting to see that it's not. So I feel like I'd be a little wary of him this weekend, especially with Jarvis Landry coming back a little healthier, and the Ravens struggle against those intermediate routes in which Landry makes his bread and butter. So stay away from Odell. I agree. DJ Chark, I mean, he's been so much fun to watch, and I really do think him and Minshew have a real connection there. So I like DJ there, and I'd go with him as well.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll go DJ. Jason Damaratsky, should I start Josh Allen or Joe Burrow? Josh Allen, no questions asked. Legs, arm, same offense, another year in it. Say what you want about the accuracy or the last time we saw him where it looked like he just lost his mind in the second half of that playoff game. I think he's going to be back. It's a bad Jets team. You can run, you can pass. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, first NFL game against the Chargers defense that can be pretty good. Even if it's at home, I don't like it. I'm going to go Josh Allen.
Look, I do genuinely think there could be an upset for the Bengals this week, and Joe Burrow takes home his first NFL win. But at the same time, do I think that necessarily converts and translates to fantasy output? Maybe to a degree, but I think it's safer to pick Josh Allen because not one thing you didn't mention, which and 'cause I liked everything you talked about the Bills offense, all the surrounding context there, but the Bills defense also was one of the nastier units in the NFL, and that can only help a fantasy quarterback's value, right? His stock goes up because maybe they have more possessions. Maybe he runs the ball a little more. Maybe
Sure.
he's able to just, in more possessions, put out more fantasy points for you. So I would trust, at the very least this week, because we know Josh Allen is a top 10 guy, I would trust Josh Allen. And I think genuinely, I think in the future, Andy, I think Joe Burrow is going to be the Josh Allen of the future. I really do think that because he has the rushing ability as well. He's smart. He's a big dude. But for right now, for week one, especially, again, I use the term truncated offseason a lot today. With that kind of offseason being the case for someone like Joe Burrow, I would personally go with Mr. Bills QB Josh Allen.
That's right. And I'm just getting an update here. From Roto World says Kenny Golladay hamstring officially out.
Okay, there you go.
Week one. That is very bad news for one of my fantasy teams. That is not good for me. That is troublesome. I'm dealing with this in real time emotionally. But this is not good.
Yeah, I can see it on your face. Just like that The Simpsons where they can see where his heart broke.
Yeah. And it just goes. That was me. I had my fantasy team named All Day Golladays. This is no good. This is no good. Okay. David Montgomery, if you're a David Montgomery owner, officially active for the Bears.
All right.
Now, again, whether the usage gets limited a bit, Tariq Cohen cutting in, that's a question mark. But Golladay out with the hammy, David Montgomery in, and how much, who knows? Let's see here. All right, Josh on YouTube. Hey, guys, half PPR league. I got Chubb and Ingram at running back. Good-looking group. Should I start Marvin Jones or Marlon Mack in my flex?
I know where you're going.
Right now, Marvin Jones, baby. Josh, if you just heard Golladay out, you got to get Marvin Jones in, especially Danny Amendola is going to be a game-time decision too. That takes down another check down. I think it's Jones and Hawkinson as the big winners this week, and then the rest gets divvied up between that disgusting fantasy committee in the backfield. Thanks for nothing, Matt Patricia.
Yeah, and I think for Josh as well, he mentioned his other option was Marlon Mack. And now I agree, it's got to be Marvin Jones, especially with the news you just broke about Golladay. But at the same time, I do think Jonathan Taylor is going to be eventually the guy. But yeah, I think we'll have to wait a couple of weeks to see that because Marlon Mack is a talented running back. He's a talented guy. He did it for a lot of guys, even just as soon as last season, right? He was pretty decent for the Colts behind their pretty stellar offensive line. So now, having said that, it's going to be Jonathan Taylor's his backfield eventually. And especially for this week, I don't know if you want to wade into the quagmire that is, do I start Taylor? Do I start Marlon Mack? Versus, Marvin Jones is going to get the lion's share of the targets. Hey, lion's share. I didn't even do that on purpose. But
there you go.
So you can have Marvin Jones in there as your number one wideout for Detroit.
This is another early inactive coming from Adam Schefter. Lane Johnson of the Eagles. So you're losing a key piece to that offensive line that could affect, again, the running game, the options, and maybe if they're pressured more, quick outlet passes.
Does that change your answer on the Wentz versus Stafford from earlier?
You know what? I don't think so because I think there's enough quick outlet passes that Wentz can make to get away from that. I think you could line up Jackson in the slot if you need to. I think there's enough options to be able to do that. And you can always slide one of the tight ends too. Like Ertz and Goddard aren't bad blockers. Sure. They're not all world, but so I think I'll still keep it there.
All right.
Let's see. So we have this from Vil Leninin, Diggs or Deshaun Jackson. Ooh, okay. So back to Philly and then to Buffalo. I'd say out of that group, listen, if we were talking before Diggs or John Brown, I think I would go Brown for the familiarity aspect. I kind of think that Diggs is the better choice here, especially with that Lane Johnson move. I still think Deshaun Jackson can have a good day. Deshaun Jackson can still do well, but maybe Diggs is the safer choice here. I think I'll go Diggs.
I think I would probably go Diggs as well because, like I said, I do like John Brown. Between John Brown and Diggs, I like John Brown as the more attractive option, like you were just talking about. But with Deshaun Jackson being the guy you're comparing Diggs to, I think also, now that you were talking about Lane Johnson being out, I almost feel like Wentz will have less time to get Djax the ball because the kind of routes that Djax has run in the past for Philly are those long developing plays, right? And I think if you're comparing Diggs to Jackson, then I feel like he's a more of a crafty route runner. That's actually one of the more attractive things about Stephon Diggs is that he's a very, very good route runner.
Yeah.
And I think Buffalo knows that. It's not that Philly doesn't know that about Djax. It's just that's his strength, and that's how they're going to use him. And I think the intermediate routes for Philly are going to be taken up, like you were just saying, by Ertz and Goddard. And if that's the case, then I feel like for this week you might want to go with Stephon instead.
Yeah, I'm with you. Zach on YouTube, Tyler Boyd or Marvin Jones Jr. PPR. Let's dial up some Marvin Jones because it's not a rookie quarterback. I think you got Matthew Stafford. We just talked about it, right? Stafford, tremendous when healthy. Joe Burrow, we like him career-wise. Game 1 NFL could be weird. So I'm going to say Marvin Jones there in PPR for sure. I think he's going to get a lot of work.
Yeah, I know we talked up Tyler Boyd before, and we kind of talked down poo-pooed AJ Green a little bit. I think rightly so. But ultimately, yeah, I really do feel like for Marvin Jones in particular, I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about Marvin Jones. I mean, the guy was already a good second fiddle in Detroit and elsewhere in his career, and now he's going to be the number one guy with a guy like Stafford throwing him the ball. Now, again, the question mark for me will always be, for week 1, will always be the Chicago defense because, like you and I were talking about, they're a talented group, they're fast, they're aggressive, right? They're not afraid to hit these wide receivers over the middle, and you got to think that Marvin Jones is going to be lining up all over the place. But at the same time, I'm confident enough in Stafford being an intelligent quarterback to get him the ball in safe spaces in order to be able to run down the field and make opportunities and make the best of his opportunities. So I would, even though I do really like Tyler Boyd on the season, for today, I would, because of the Galladay news, I would go Marvin Jones for sure.
All right, now we're to Sam the Man on YouTube. Devontae Parker or Amari Cooper as my flex?
That's a tough one.
That is a tough one. Devontae Parker is going to be receiving Stephon Gilmore coverage, the treatment. Right. He burned him last time, but you'd think Gilmore would be extra motivated. I do like that Ryan Fitzpatrick is in. They do have a chemistry. Mm-hmm. And I feel that there's less choices for Miami than with Dallas, right? Okay. We talked about it, right? So like Cooper, okay, if Cooper gets smothered, all right, CeeDee Lamb, cool. Gallup, Zeke, Jarwin. Like you have a lot of high octane power there. In Miami, okay, there's Preston Williams. You got Breida, Howard in the backfield. Gesicki we like. Like there's guys, but there's not the same talent level. So I'm going to say Parker in my flex.
I probably would. Oh, that's tough. You know, it's funny. I feel like these questions are great. I love answering people's questions. So send more if you got them. But I think one of my favorite parts about them is like I spent earlier arguing against Devontae Parker because of the hamstring, and now you have to basically argue the other side of it.
You have to do the other side, yeah.
Which I think it's really funny, but it's true. I think you're right. I think you made a good point, Andy, about how there's a lot of other options in Dallas if Amari doesn't get going. Now, I think as much as I said Cowboys-Rams has the potential to be a high-scoring game, I actually think that Dolphins-Patriots has the potential to be a high-scoring game as well. I mean, we were going to do if we have time, we were going to do some best bets of the week. And I think saw the last I checked that the Dolphins-Patriots total had actually gone up. When I checked it a couple of days ago, it was at 42 even, and now it's at 43.5. And I still like the Dolphins and Patriots to go over 43.5 total points, right? So if that's the case, then Devontae Parker will have to be getting looks and touches and catches and so on. And I think he will. Ryan Fitzpatrick, like you were saying, has a genuine connection with Devontae Parker. And even though he will be, I think, somewhat limited because of the hamstring and somewhat limited because he's playing Stephon Gilmore, we know what happened in the season finale in Foxborough last year where Devontae Parker just did whatever he wanted to Stephon Gilmore. Yeah. So, yeah, that's as much as it pains me to admit it, I think you might want to go with Parker.
Let's see here. So we did Parker, Butter on YouTube. How do you think the Cowboys' 3 wide receiver trio will work out in their first game, especially with Cooper likely not at 100%? So kind of going off what we just said there.
Yeah.
They could maybe in week 1 cannibalize themselves a little bit. And remember, folks, we don't know what this new Mike McCarthy offense is supposed to look like. Now, this is from Mike McCarthy and his whole selling pitch to get a new head coaching job. He said he took all of last season off after getting fired by Green Bay to revamp the offense. He's on the analytics. It's all like the secret little, hey, I got it. Trust me on this one. Well, what is it, Mike? Don't worry about it. I got you. It's like, okay, he had a sleepover at Jerry's house. Who knows? So we don't necessarily know. We can't really throw it back to, let's say, oh, it's just going to be what it was in Green Bay. It might be, but I think probably Amari gets the first look. I think we kind of go in order. I think we do Amari, CD, and Gallup. Maybe because of the lesser coverage, CD Lamb gets a bump up. But I think really Zeke Elliott's going to be the winner out of that whole offense. So
and that's the thing. That's the thing. If Amari is limited, I don't personally think that the snap count, or maybe that's not the right word, the target share perhaps for CD and Gallup, I don't think it goes up. I just think it means they run the ball with Zeke more. And it's hard. It's easy to forget, I should say, that Zeke catches the ball quite a bit as well. He's no slouch in catching the ball. Right. Absolutely. And if that's the case, then you got to think that when it comes to who will benefit of all those guys, it's going to be Zeke. But at the same time, I think it's going to be Amari Cooper. Even if he's banged up, he's going to be the guy, the number one guy. But Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb, I feel like are going to be battling it out, probably matchup based for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it might be more of an issue of who gets between those two.
Exactly.
Let's see here. Jerry on Facebook. CeeDee Lamb or Henry Ruggs standard scoring. I would go CeeDee Lamb because I don't believe in Henry Ruggs, and I think
you don't like Henry Ruggs.
I don't like him. I think it's going to be Bryan Edwards. I think maybe Hunter Renfrow, Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller. I don't like it.
Yeah, I feel like for me, Henry Ruggs. I said this to you before. I feel like Ruggs this year will be like what Marquise Brown was for the Ravens last year. He's going to have a game. Who knows? It may not be this week, but I feel like Henry Ruggs is going to be the player who blows up one week. Everyone reaches for him on waiver. Everyone goes out there. Yeah, you spend your waiver money, you spend your priority or whatever to get Henry Ruggs because you think, oh man, no Tyrell. Henry's going to be the guy. But he's so boom or bust, and it's so hard to sniff out the boom or bust weeks themselves. So if that's the case, I'd rather stay away from the dart throw that is Henry Ruggs. Because look, if you hit it, it's great, but I feel like it's more often than not you won't. So if that's the case, I would take CeeDee Lamb. I'd also like to know what kind of league this is. If it was a standard or PPR,
it says standard. It says standard.
Oh, it does standard. It does say standard there. Okay, then if it's a standard, then I think that is more balanced in CD's favor.
I'm with you. Let's see. Matt on YouTube. Do you take a shot at Antonio Gibson in flex standard scoring? Standard's the key here. In standard, no. I don't like it in standard. I really like him in PPR. Remember, guys, Gibson had less than 70 total snaps in college. For his whole college career, less than 70. That's as raw as you can get. Now, the talent's huge. The size you love, 6'2", 200 pounds. Ron Rivera compared him to a Christian McCaffrey-like weapon. You got to love that. I think he's going to get some great opportunities, but for standard, do I think he's going to rack up a bunch of yards? No. Do I think he's going to get some touches? Yes. And really, we're going to have to see how he develops in the NFL game. So standard, I say no.
I see. Here's the thing. I would only disagree with you only because there are not that many other guys competing with him for touches, right? Like the backfield in Washington is essentially Antonio Gibson, Bryce Love, and J.D. McKissick, right? And I know J.D. McKissick has, from what we've heard, carved out that passing down, passing back role. But Antonio Gibson, it remains to be seen how much Dwayne Haskins likes him. And I feel like they've been very hush-hush about how they've been using things in practice, and even trying to glean some information from reporters has not been that helpful. But ultimately, I feel like, I feel like I would still try him out for week one. The other thing, too, is with Antonio Gibson, even though he did rocket up charts after AP was released from Washington in terms of draft stock and draft positioning and all that kind of stuff, you probably still didn't spend that much draft capital.
Yeah, probably not.
Like, ultimately speaking, right? I feel like week one is maybe the time to try it out. And if it doesn't work, then you cut bait or you leave him on the bench for a little while. In standard, I know it's a little more tough to swallow, a little less palatable to start Gibson in a non-PPR league, but I would still take the chance this week against an Eagles defense that can be had.
Especially against receivers.
Yes.
Let's see here. Edelman or Devin Singletary, half-point PPR. Edelman. Singletary's fantasy stock is so low right now. Zach Moss is a situation. What about when this gets to the goal line? It could be Zach Moss. It could be Josh Allen.
Sure.
It might, but like Singletary is almost the third choice when it comes to that. The fantasy stock is low, so I'm going to say Julian Edelman, you would think, would still be getting a hearty workload out of Cam Newton, especially with there not being a lot of true weapons in New England on offense.
That's the thing. Yeah, I think with Julian Edelman, I know I'm speaking with Homer goggles on, but at the same time, he is more valuable in PPR leagues, half and full, obviously, because his bread and butter is over the middle, and he makes those tough catches look routine. We've seen it in the Super Bowls, right? Remember that crazy catch against the
Yeah.
in the big comeback when he caught it like an inch off the ground or something like that. I feel like he is talented enough, and Cam needs the safety valve. Now, the safety valve may also be James White. It may end up being N'Keal Harry. It may be someone else, but I feel like the most likely candidate, the safest play, is Julian Edelman.
Yeah, I think it's got to be. He's the most reliable. Tim on Twitch. Besides Edelman, who will be Cam's go-to wide receiver in New England this year? So if we're talking just wide receiver, the next guy, and really to me, the only logical answer is N'Keal Harry.
It has to be, yeah.
Right? Like it's got to be. The rookie year, injured for a bunch, came in. Does he take a DK Metcalf type step forward as he starts developing? He's got the body, he's got the framework. Has he developed chemistry with Cam Newton? I think outside of that, just in the wide receiver group, it's got to be N'Keal Harry, but I'd be a little tentative until we see how that offense is put together.
Yeah, maybe Jacoby Myers, but that seems like such a shot in the dark. It just draft pedigree would suggest that they're going to give at the very least N'Keal Harry more of a leash in terms of how much they're going to let him be out there. And I think he also struggled with injuries last year as well. So I think he's supposed to be he's suiting up as healthy, which I love. Also born in Toronto, if that makes a difference for you at all.
Well, it's funny because apparently like NFL Canada wanted to do some work with him,
right?
But he didn't want to like acknowledge that he was like Canadian. You're a jerk, N'Keal Harry. He doesn't want to be Canadian.
Oh, that's funny.
Anyway,
he does project out to be kind of like in terms of the roles. If you want to, I know people like to do comparing. I feel like he projects out to Kelvin Benjamin's first couple of years with Cam Newton before before all the weight gain and before he got cut and so on. But I feel like N'Keal Harry could be that for Cam this year. He's a tall guy. He's fast. He has some weight that he can throw around. So I feel like, like you said, the logical answer, very Star Trek, very Spock of you. The logical answer is N'Keal.
I want to get to this one. A couple more questions. We're almost up against it here, folks, already. Wow, fast hour. Hertzler on YouTube. With Sanders out, Le'Veon Bell or Leonard Fournette at RB2. I'm going Le'Veon Bell because, again, we go back to this thing. It's my basic formula. I'm not good at math, show, but this is my formula. Opportunities equal success. Who's going to get more opportunities? Leonard Fournette or Ronald Jones in Tampa Bay? We don't know. If Adam Gase chooses to bless the fantasy world with proper running back usage, which would be one of the first times he does, we know Le'Veon Bell is going to be the guy out of the backfield. Can catch, can run. If he's used properly, he's going to get the touches. And I think Le'Veon Bell is the choice there for me.
I would agree too. I genuinely think that Le'Veon Bell, he is so talented. He is a talented guy. I know the Steelers did their best to run him into the ground when he was with Pittsburgh, but I feel like even though Adam Gase has not had the best usage track record for Le'Veon, he still catches the ball. He's one of the more reliable targets in New York for Sam Darnold. I mean, like who else would you really feel comfortable starting in New York? Maybe Chris Herndon, maybe Jamison Crowder. That's probably it, right? And I mean, we know Le'Veon Bell is getting the lion's share of the carries, and he catches the ball too. So I feel like it's a no-brainer to go with Le'Veon Bell this week, especially in Miles Sanders is out. I'm glad Hertzler asked that question because I had Miles Sanders and I'm replacing with Le'Veon Bell in one league, and I don't feel great about it because you don't feel great about starting any New York Jets, a bad football team. Yeah. But I mean, you don't have a choice, but you could do a lot worse than Bell for sure.
Oh, exactly. And folks, I want to direct you as well. I got my Week 1 NFL Sleepers article up on sportsnet.ca. You can check that out. Got it up on Twitter as well at AndyMC81. To make sure you follow show also at SNS Alli. A couple more. We're up against it. Let's see. Quentin on YouTube. Waller or Herndon at tight end. Give me Darren Waller all day. All day. I think this is the one veteran really on offense beside Josh Jacobs that Derek Carr can lean to. Bryan Edwards loved the upside. He's a rookie. Henry Ruggs, he's a burner. He's a rookie. Darren Waller, he's there. Pop him in. I think Darren Waller is a sure bet over Herndon.
I would agree too. Yeah, I think that Chris Herndon was a very popular sleeper, and I do like him to be another target for Sam Darnold. But the safer bet is absolutely Darren Waller. We saw what he could do last season. He was a popular sleeper last year, and he
Yeah,
actually paid off, right? So I think
he
that
did.
now that we know what he is, I think that Derek Carr and the Raiders are going to lean on him as much as humanly possible, especially with Tyrell out. I know you said Brian Edwards. I like Brian Edwards too. They drafted Ruggs, and we talked about him. But one of the more reliable targets outside of Josh Jacobs is Darren Waller, so I'd go with
No
him.
doubt. Mark on YouTube, DJ Chark or Marvin Jones, PPR. We've talked a lot about Marvin Jones, but I think out of those two, I'm going to go DJ Chark because of the possibility for garbage fantasy points with the Jaguars and their now bad defense being down against Indy. Gardner Minshew's probably going to have to throw the ball. So I think DJ Chark is probably the safer bet versus a much better Bears defense when it comes to Marvin Jones and the Lions.
You also have to remember, too, when it comes to the Colts, they're one of those teams, and now it remains to be seen if this remains the same now that Philip Rivers is the guy under center instead of Jacoby Brissett. But it remains to be seen how they flesh it all out. But the Colts last season were one of the teams that had the longest time of possession average wise over games, right? Like they just possessed the ball a lot. So I think that is one thing I'm interested to see from the Jags possession. Like how many possessions do the Jags actually end up getting? And in those possessions, how many balls do go DJ's way? I agree with you. I do think it ends up being DJ this week because the Jags are going to have to throw the ball most likely a lot, and the Chicago defense no slouch. But at the same time, those are not two bad options there, honestly.
No, I think you're okay.
I like DJ as well. You just have to keep an eye out for Colts time of possession because those guys do like to possess the ball, and they have two pretty good running backs they can salt away the clock with.
That's right. Nyheim Hines sprinkled in there in the pass catching side. Last question for the day. Rob on Facebook. Who are your guys' DFS must starts this week? So if I'm looking at must starts, I think when it comes to value, I always sort of wrinkle towards the value side of things.
Same.
You know, like that's, I think for must start, what am I going to say? Christian McCaffrey, of course, but there's going to be a large ownership percentage of him there, right? So when I'm looking at different, I'm just pulling up a DraftKings lineup here so I can have a look at all the prices. I kind of like for value, I like Mike Gesicki at 4,500. Mm-hmm. I love Hayden Hurst versus that 29th ranked Seattle defense versus tight ends in fantasy at $4,300. I think that's great. How about TJ Hawkinson, 4,200? At tight end alone, those are three guys. I think you can get any one of them into your lineup and then go for those bigger fish outside of it instead of, let's say, going for a bigger ownership share of a George Kittle.
Right. I think that's the play for me too, right? I like the value because, like you said, every lineup or most lineups will have shares of people like McCaffrey, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, things like that. But I think that if you find the value, you can have more of those other guys, the big fish in your lineup. I think for me, I'll stick with the theme of tight ends that you laid down there. I like Gronk. I like Gronk this week for his price, 4,900. Not bad for Rob Gronkowski, considering that Mike Evans probably won't be 100%. So you got to think that Brady will lean on a trusted target. And I feel like I like as well Anthony Miller. I know the Mitch Trubisky downgrades everyone not named Allen Robinson, but I think that there's going to be targets to go around that wide receiver room that are not going to be to Allen Robinson. Like he's not going to throw the ball 40 times a game to Allen Robinson alone, right?
No.
And from a value perspective, in terms of filling out your lineup, 4,900 for Anthony Miller is not bad. And then my last guy, you and I talked about the Packers. We didn't talk about the Packers a lot today, but Allen Lazard as the number 2 wide receiver behind Devontae Adams, also 4,900. All these guys ended up being 4,900 for me, but under 5,000 is a good kind of benchmark for me. I like Allen Lazard because look, Devontae Adams, he's great, bona fide number 1 dude. But after that, I mean, again, same with Anthony Miller, right? These targets have to go to someone. No more Geronimo Allison. I like Allen Lazard this week at 4,900.
And a perfect handcuff if in a similar Jones-Galladay combo if one goes down, right? Last one here for me as far as I'll go sleeper. I think it's a great start on DraftKings. Gardner Minshew, I'm going right back. We've mentioned him all day. $5,800. I think the ownership is going to be low on him. And I think it's going to be another case where you're going to enter the fourth quarter. You're wringing your hands. He's going to have and he's going to Blake Bortles it. Jacksonville, he's going to channel Blake Bortles, folks. Okay, he's going to come back. Gardner Minshew, the path for real value there. It's a contrarian pick. You can go up elsewhere if you like, if you put in a Gardner Minshew. So that's my sleeper DFS play.
Okay, I like it. I think my sleeper for a year long. How about that? Let's give you a year long
Ooh,
sleeper.
all right.
Will be Zach Moss in Buffalo. We talked up David. We talked up Zach Moss. We talked up everyone on the Buffalo offense pretty much. John Brown, Stephon Diggs. I really like. They clearly invested in Zach Moss. I like his
Yeah.
talent level. I like his skill set. I think in a little while, Zach Moss will be the back to own in Buffalo, and I think it's exciting to. He's exciting to watch. He's fun to watch. He is so much more exciting to watch than Frank Gore was when he was with the Broncos. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
I'm with you there. All right, show. That's it. Fastest hour in sports, baby. It's
Yeah,
done. And we went over. It's an hour, 4 minutes. 4 minutes of bonus time for you people. This was a blast. We didn't even really get to our full start sits, but that's okay. We'd rather answer your questions. So for next week, so every Sunday, folks, remember, start your day 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the Sportsnet Radio Network, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, or online, whatever, get us there. And then 11 a.m. right back here, 11 to noon on Sportsnet, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. Comment below. We'll get to your questions, and give us a follow on Twitter as well. After the show, we'll answer your fantasy questions at AndyMC81 at SNSLE. All right, show. Let's go enjoy some football, man. Let's have some fun.
Good luck. Good luck, Andy. Hope you may all your fantasy lineups, and to everyone out there, may all your fantasy lineups be blessed today.
a blessing at the end from the fantasy football gods. All right. For show, I'm Andy. You've been watching Fantasy Football Live. Enjoy the games, folks.